Hello there, and welcome back to Chapter 2, Part B. We are going to talk here about prepositional phrases, also a little bit about adjectives and adverbs. You may not have known it, but these concepts of prepositional phrases and adverbs and adjectives actually go hand in hand. Let's dive right in and get started. Adjectives and adverbs are also members of the form classes, the way we learned about with nouns and verbs in Chapter 2, Part A. We're going to talk a lot more about the members of the open classes when we talk about Chapter 12, but just like nouns and verbs, adjectives and adverbs can be identified by their forms. It's not quite as cut and dry, though, as it was with the nouns and verbs, which had 2 and 3 inflectional suffixes, respectively. With adjectives and adverbs, one great way you can know you're dealing with them is that they have a comparative or superlative form at the end. So nice, nicer, nicest, or fast, faster, fastest. These are comparative and superlative forms that we see in practice. Adjectives and adverbs can use more and most as comparative and superlative markers also, if the word is more than one syllable is when this usually happens. Flattering, more flattering, and most flattering. We wouldn't say flatteringer and flatteringest, for example. Or adeptly, more adeptly, most adeptly. Adjectives and adverbs can take qualifiers like very, very hungry, very swiftly, or if we wanted to be fancy, something like rather hungry. Adverbs can derive from adjectives, which is kind of cool. You can take an adjective like beautiful, add a derivational suffix, more on this with our morphemes chapter 11, and it becomes beautifully. Loving becomes lovingly, strange becomes strangely. Adjectives come in a specific place in the sentence almost always. They're going to be in the noun phrase, and they're going to be in between the determiner and the head word. So for example, 2 adorable bulldogs. 2 is the determiner, bulldogs is the head word, adorable is our adjective. We don't have to have a determiner. Pungent flowers is a noun phrase with no determiner at the present time. And you'll notice that the adjective still comes before the head word. Very, very occasionally, you can have an adjective that comes after the head word. For example, if the head word is something, you might say something strange, but this is an exception rather than the rule. They almost always come in between the determiner and the head word. Adverbs, though, are not at all bound by those rules. Adverbs are super movable. They can come at the beginning, middle, or end of the sentence. They don't even have to be in the predicate. So here we see an example of the adverb at the very beginning of the sentence. Occasionally, Brittany practices throw-ins. There it is, outside the predicate, living its own life. Brittany occasionally practices throw-ins. There it is in the middle of the sentence. And Brittany practices throw-ins occasionally. The adverb, no matter where it appears, is still modifying the verb. That's its job. Let's take a brief break from adjectives and adverbs to talk about prepositional phrases. Prepositional phrases, you may not have thought much about these before, but we're going to be thinking quite a bit about them throughout our grammar class. They have 2 components always, the preposition and the object of the preposition. We're going to talk about these so much more in Chapter 13. But if you're curious about a partial list of the prepositions, take a look on page 268 in our textbook. You're going to want to go ahead and dog-ear this page so you can return back to it with frequency. When I learned about prepositions back in, I won't tell you when, back in a long time ago, I learned that they were anything a mouse can be to a house. So, the mouse in the house, the mouse below the house, the mouse above the house, the mouse on the house. This is fine, but more correctly, prepositions are words that are placed before or in preposition to noun phrases or nominals. So the noun phrase that comes after the preposition, that's going to be the object of the preposition. So in the field, in is our preposition, the field is the object of the preposition. Under the bridge, under is our preposition, the bridge is the object. Prepositional phrases can behave, this is so important, prepositional phrases can behave either as adjectivals or as adverbials. An adjectival is anything that modifies a noun. So not just restricted to actual adjectives, anything that modifies a noun, no matter its form, can be an adjectival. So a prepositional phrase, which in its form is very, very clearly not an adjective, can function as an adjectival. In the same way, adverbials, things that aren't adverbs but that function like adverbs, can also come into play here when we're talking about prepositional phrases. A prepositional phrase in form can function as an adverbial modifier. This is so important because we are going to have to determine the function of these prepositional phrases. You really can't tell what it's doing just by looking at its form. Let's dive into this concept a little bit more. The form of the prepositional phrase is different than the function of the prepositional phrase. What it looks like is different than what it's doing. Your book gives us a fantastic example in the prepositional phrase across the hall. This is a prepositional phrase. We have the preposition across, and we have the object of the preposition the hall. But in function, it could be modifying a noun, functioning adjectivally, or modifying a verb, functioning adverbially. Let's look at the sentence, our new neighbors across the hall became our best friends. Here, what is across the hall modifying? What's it describing? It's describing the neighbors, our new neighbors across the hall. Which neighbors? The ones across the hall. Since it's modifying the noun, it's functioning adjectively. In a different example, our good friends live across the hall. The same prepositional phrase appears to be modifying something else. Here, it's answering a different question. It's telling us where they live. It's modifying the verb, live. It's answering the kind of question that adverbs are designed to answer. So the first one is adjectival and the second one is adverbial, even though it's the exact same prepositional phrase. Again, and I can't stress this enough because it's going to come back so many times, the function of the prepositional phrase is not dependent on its form. This is a big deal because these sentences are going to look so different when we diagram them, which is what we're ramping up to. I took the liberty of diagramming them for us in advance, and you can see that they look pretty different. Don't freak out. I know this is the first time many of you will be seeing a sentence diagram. Don't freak out. We are going to be able to do this together. We will be able to produce these kinds of diagrams. What's important for us to notice now is the prepositional phrase across the hall, which I've highlighted in red in both images. Our new neighbors across the hall, you'll notice that across the hall is underneath the noun headword neighbors, because that's what it's modifying. It's modifying the noun. It's functioning adjectively. In the sentence, our good friends live across the hall, the same prepositional phrase is totally chilling under live, the verb it's modifying, because it's functioning adverbially. So at this point, you really have to be asking yourself, how can I figure out if something is functioning adverbially or adjectively? I have good news for you. We have a method. This method is in the form of noun-y and verb-y questions. Woo! When we say noun-y and verb-y questions, we're using a sort of informal shorthand to talk about adjectival and adverbial functions. Adjectives modify nouns. That's what they do. Adverbs modify verbs. Fine. Good. But adjectives and adjectivals, you may not have realized, are answering a certain set of questions about the nouns they modify. And the same can be said of adverbs and adverbials. They're answering a certain set of questions about the verbs they modify. So when I say a noun-y question, I mean a question that signals an adjectival. A question like, which one? What kind of? What color? In our sample sentence, my friend in the dorms is nice. Which question is being answered by the prepositional phrase in the dorms? My friend in the dorms is nice. Which question? It's answering the question of which one. Which friend? My friend in the dorms. It's answering a noun-y question. So it has to be functioning adjectively, and it has to be diagrammed underneath the noun. Verb-y questions answer a different set of questions, and it's a larger question set. Questions like where and when and why and how often. The kinds of questions that adverbs frequently answer. Adverbs and, of course, adverbials, like the prepositional phrase, my friend resides in the dorms. Which question is being answered here? My friend resides in the dorms? It's answering the question, of course, of where. My friend resides where? In the dorms. It's answering that adverbial, it's answering that verb-y question. This is how we can tell if something is functioning adverbially or adjectivally. Is it answering a noun-y question or a verb-y question? You're going to want to practice with this quite a bit on your own, and we will practice it quite a bit together in class as well. Butch says that he knows this is challenging. You're thinking about languages in a whole new way, but keep it up, keep working hard, and soon this will all start to come together. See you next time.